"Spread your legs," Mountain Man told the fat girl. Then he did something that changed her life forever. "Spread your legs, girl, now." The words cut through the cold Montana air like a gunshot. For a brief, trembling moment, Charity Cherry O'Brien thought she was about to be violated. Her mind spun with terror as the heavy wagon wheel pressed against her thigh, pinning her to the rocky dirt road. Pain burned through her leg. Blood soaked her torn dress. The driver, who should have helped, had run off screaming into the woods, leaving her stranded halfway up Thunder Ridge. It was late autumn of 1883, and the sun had already disappeared behind the ridge. The forest around her was sinking into shadow. Wolves howled somewhere in the distance. The night air bit into her skin. When she heard hoofbeats approach, she prayed to God it wasn't bandits. Then the rider dismounted, a tall, broad-shouldered man with gray streaks in his hair and the steady eyes of someone who had seen too much death. "I'm a doctor," he said firmly, kneeling beside her. "You're bleeding badly. If I don't see the wound now, you'll lose the leg or your life." Still shaking, Cherry obeyed. The man tore open his saddlebag, working with calm precision even as the wind howled around them. The smell of whiskey, leather, and pine filled the air. "Hold still," he murmured, voice deep as the mountains themselves. "I need you to trust me." That night, on a lonely mountain road where no one should have survived, a disgraced young woman and a haunted mountain doctor crossed paths, and nothing in either of their lives would ever be the same again. Where are you listening from tonight? Because this story, one of pain, mercy, and unexpected love, starts right here on Thunder Ridge. Cherry O'Brien had never been anyone's first choice. In every town she passed through, people whispered the same cruel words: too big, too loud, too much. At 23, she carried the kind of body society mocked, a body built for hard work, not for beauty. Her red hair framed a face too soft, too round, and her green eyes were always full of apologies. She had come west chasing the smallest glimmer of dignity, hoping the Henderson Ranch in Montana would take her in as a cook. It was supposed to be a new beginning. Instead, she lay trapped under an overturned wagon in the freezing dusk, praying to survive. Her left leg throbbed in agony, and her breath came out in sharp, white clouds. When she first saw the stranger approach, tall, lean, wrapped in a heavy wool coat, fear clenched her chest. Men on these roads were not known for kindness, but the way he moved told her everything she needed to know. He didn't hesitate, didn't leer. His hands were steady, his gaze clinical, almost sorrowful. "My name's Dr. Samuel Crawford," he said as he cut away the fabric from her leg. His voice was deep and careful, carrying both command and compassion. "I was a surgeon in the war. Don't panic. I'm here to help." Cherry blinked through tears. Why would you stop for me?" He looked up briefly, eyes glinting in the firelight from his lantern. "Because someone once stopped for me." As he worked, Cherry studied him through her haze of pain. He must have been near 40, though his face carried more years than that. A scar ran along his jawline, and his hair was streaked with gray like the ash in a dying fire. His coat bore the faint insignia of the Union Army. "You fought?" she asked weakly. He nodded. "And lost more than I ever care to remember." When he finally freed her leg, the bone was badly fractured, blood pooling in the dirt. Cherry cried out as he splinted it with precision born from years of battlefield surgeries. He never once looked away in disgust, though the wound was gruesome. "Done," he said softly. "You're safe, for now." The words hit her harder than the cold. No one had ever called her safe before. As he bandaged her leg and secured her to his horse, Cherry fought back tears. Her body ached, but her heart trembled more from disbelief than pain. He mounted behind her, holding her steady as the horse began its slow climb through the pine forest. The world around them was pitch black, except for the lantern's trembling light. Snowflakes drifted down like whispers of mercy. "Why live up here?" she asked quietly, trying to ignore the pain. Dr. Crawford's answer came after a long silence. "Because the mountains don't judge." Cherry turned her head slightly. "And the people?" A faint, almost bitter smile crossed his face. "There are no people." The wind howled through the trees as they rode on. Behind them, the broken wagon and her old life disappeared into the shadows. For the first time in years, Cherry felt like the darkness wasn't swallowing her. It was carrying her somewhere new, somewhere she might finally be seen, not for her size or her shame, but simply as a woman worth saving. The trail to Dr. Crawford's cabin wound through the thick spine of Thunder Ridge like a living beast, narrow, cold, and treacherous. The horse's hooves crunched through frozen mud and pine needles, while the faint glow of Sam's lantern cut through the darkness like a small defiance against the night. Cherry clung to the saddle horn, her fingers numb, her leg pulsing with each step of the horse. The pain made her dizzy, but she tried to stay quiet. She didn't want to be a burden, not again. She had been told all her life that she was one. Behind her, Sam's voice was low and steady, his breath warm against the back of her neck. "If you start to fade, tell me. I won't have you passing out in this cold." She nodded, her teeth chattering. "How much farther?" "2 more miles," he said. "We'll make it." Every so often he shifted his weight carefully, making sure she didn't slip. His gloved hands, large and steady, rested just close enough to catch her if she fell, but never crossed a line. The forest around him was a symphony of sounds, the sighing of pines, the creak of old branches, the distant hoot of an owl. Occasionally Sam spoke, to keep her awake, or maybe to keep himself from drifting into memories. "Where were you headed?" he asked. "Henderson Ranch," she whispered. "They said they needed a cook. It's all I'm good for, really." He frowned, though she couldn't see it. "Cooking feeds people. That's not nothing." Cherry let out a trembling laugh. "That's the kindest thing anyone said to me this year." Sam didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was softer. "You'll hear kinder things before the night is over." A gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying a flurry of snow that caught in Cherry's hair. She tilted her head slightly, watching how the flakes glittered in the lantern light before melting on her lashes. It was strange, how even in pain she felt a strange peace here in the silence beside this man. When they finally emerged from the dense forest, the landscape opened into a clearing blanketed in moonlight. Ahead stood a wooden cabin, modest but sturdy, smoke curling gently from its chimney. A single oil lamp burned in the window, casting a golden square of warmth against the snow. "Is that yours?" she asked faintly. Sam nodded. "Home." He helped her down carefully, wrapping a thick blanket around her shoulders. She winced as her foot touched the ground, but his arm was already there, firm and reassuring. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine sap, smoke, and something faintly medicinal, like camphor and herbs. The walls were lined with shelves of bottles and books. A wooden desk was scattered with medical tools, neatly arranged and shining in the lamplight. Sam guided her to a chair near the hearth. "Sit. I'll tend to your leg properly." Cherry tried to protest. "You've done enough. He cut her off gently. "You're under my care now. That means I see this through." As he worked, she watched him in the firelight, his brow furrowed, his movements precise, deliberate. His face was weathered, marked by years of worry and solitude, but there was something about him that radiated safety, an authority born not from power, but from compassion. At one point, she whispered, "You don't even know me. Why go through all this trouble?" He paused, looking up from her bandaged leg. The flicker of the fire danced in his blue-gray eyes. "Because no one deserves to die alone on a mountain road," he said simply. "Not on my watch." The words hit her harder than the whiskey he poured to clean the wound. When the pain grew too much, she bit her lip and gripped the edge of the chair. He noticed, paused his work, and poured a small cup of tea from the kettle. "Willow bark," he said. "It'll dull the pain." Cherry took the cup with trembling hands. The warmth spread through her chest, melting some of the fear away. Outside, the wind howled and the snow thickened, but inside that small cabin there was only the crackle of firewood and the quiet rhythm of a man saving a stranger's life. For the first time since the accident, Cherry felt safe, not because she was rescued, but because she was finally seen, not as a burden, not as a body to mock, but as a soul worth saving. The first night passed in a blur of pain and exhaustion. When Cherry woke, it was to the soft hiss of the fire and the faint smell of coffee drifting through the room. Her leg was wrapped neatly in clean bandages and a quilt, thick, handmade and patched from different shades of flannel, covered her from shoulders to feet. For a long moment, she didn't move. She just listened. The crackling logs, the steady drip of melting snow from the roof, the sound of someone moving carefully across the wooden floorboards. Then came the deep, even voice. "You're awake." Dr. Samuel Crawford was standing by the stove, sleeves rolled up, stirring something in a pot. His hair was damp from snowmelt, his shirt open at the throat. The early light painted the cabin in hues of gold and smoke. Cherry tried to sit up, grimacing at the pain in her leg. He was beside her in a second, one strong hand bracing her back. "Easy," he said quietly. "You'll tear the stitches." Her cheeks flushed as he adjusted the pillows behind her. I don't mean to trouble you." He gave a faint smile. "If you were trouble, I'd have left you on the ridge." It was meant as humor, but his tone was so dry that Cherry couldn't tell if he was joking until she saw the ghost of amusement in his eyes. She let out a shaky laugh. "You've got a dark sense of humor, Doctor." He poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Comes with the job." Over the next few days, Cherry learned the rhythms of the cabin, the way Sam rose before dawn to split firewood, the careful order of his medical tools, the small garden of dried herbs he kept hanging from the rafters. Despite the ruggedness of his life, everything was clean, deliberate, disciplined. She tried to help, but her injured leg forced her to rely on him more than she liked. Each morning he changed her bandages, checking the wound with a gentleness that surprised her. His hands were rough, scarred, yet precise, like a craftsman tending to something fragile. One evening, As he wrapped a fresh strip of linen around her calf, she asked softly, "Does it ever get lonely up here?" He tied the bandage, then sat back on his heels. "It's quieter than the war. That's all I ever wanted." "Do you ever miss people?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering, "Not the ones I left behind." She could tell there were ghosts behind his words, the kind that haunted in silence. Days passed into weeks. The wound began to close, and Cherry learned to move about with a crutch he'd made from a polished branch. She insisted on helping in the kitchen, peeling potatoes, washing dishes, stirring soup. "You'll undo my work," he warned the first time she stood at the counter. "I'd rather undo your work than sit feeling useless," she replied, eyes defiant but kind. He chuckled. "Fair enough, but if you faint, I'm not carrying you again." They found a rhythm together. Evenings became their quiet sanctuary. He would sit by the fire reading from a weathered medical journal while she mended torn sleeves or listened to the wind outside. Sometimes he read aloud, his voice steady, low, soothing, like a lullaby. Cherry loved those moments most. The firelight softened the lines of his face, and the loneliness that clung to him seemed to fade. She wondered if he knew how much peace his voice brought her. One night, as snow fell thick outside, Sam placed another log on the fire and said, almost to himself, "You remind me what gentleness sounds like." Cherry froze, needle poised above the cloth. "Gentleness?" He met her gaze. "Most people forget how to speak softly after they've seen too much pain. You haven't." Her throat tightened. "Maybe because pain's all I've ever known. I just learned to speak around it." For a long while neither of them said anything. Only the fire spoke, popping, breathing, filling the cabin with warmth. As days stretched into months, spring began to melt the snow outside. Cherry's laughter filled the small cabin, a sound Sam hadn't realized he'd missed. She made the place brighter, warmer. She started to walk again, limping at first, then stronger each day. When she burned a batch of biscuits one morning, Sam just shook his head, smiling. "I've had worse meals in army camps." She swatted his arm with a rag. "That's not the compliment you think it is." He laughed, really laughed, and Cherry's heart fluttered at the sound. The mountain, once silent and somber, now echoed faintly with life again. For the first time in years, Sam found himself waiting for someone's footsteps, someone's voice. For the first time in her life, Cherry felt that her presence didn't take up too much space. It belonged. In that small wooden cabin, far from the cruelty of the world, two broken souls had begun to knit each other back together, stitch by careful stitch, like the bandages he tied around her leg, like the quiet mercy that had brought them both there. By the time the last of the snow had melted from Thunder Ridge, Cherry could walk on her own again. The limp was barely noticeable now, and Sam said she healed faster than most men he'd treated in the army. But while her body mended, her heart began to tremble for a different reason. The cabin no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like home, and that terrified her. Every morning she awoke to the sound of Sam chopping wood, his axe striking in steady rhythm, echoing through the valley like a heartbeat. Every evening she watched him wash his hands at the basin before dinner, sleeves rolled up, jaw tight with the weight of a man who'd seen too much. She had come to know his silences as well as his words. Sometimes he stared into the fire for so long that it seemed he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere full of gunfire and screams. One night, She found him sitting outside the cabin, alone under a sky of endless stars. His coat hung loosely over his shoulders, and in his hand was a silver locket. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. He didn't look up. "Haven't slept much since '63. She stepped closer. "The war?" He nodded once. "And what came after?" He opened the locket, revealing a tiny portrait of a woman with kind eyes and a baby in her arms. Cherry's breath caught. "Your wife?" He nodded again. "And my son." His voice cracked on the last word. "They didn't survive the fever that swept through the camp after I came home. I tried to save them. God knows I tried. But a doctor can't always cure his own house." The silence between them was thick, sacred. Cherry lowered herself beside him, her hand trembling slightly as it brushed against his sleeve. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He finally looked at her. "Don't be. I tell myself I came here to forget. But maybe I just came here to punish myself." The words lodged deep in her chest. She wanted to tell him he'd already done enough penance. That kindness like his deserved forgiveness. But before she could speak, distant hoofbeats broke through the quiet night. Sam stood instantly, his body tense. "Stay inside," he ordered. Cherry obeyed, peering through the window as 3 riders emerged from the trees, 2 men and a woman. Their clothes were dusty, their horses thin, and one of them wore a deputy's badge that caught the moonlight. When Sam stepped outside, the deputy called, "We're looking for a runaway named Charity O'Brien. Worked for the Hendersons. Wagon crashed last winter. Figured she died." Cherry froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Runaway." The word cut like a knife. Sam's voice was calm but guarded. "You figure wrong. No one's been through here all winter." The woman on horseback leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You sure about that, Doc? Heard tell you used to be a man of the law before you buried yourself up here." Sam's jaw flexed. "I'm a doctor, that's all." The riders exchanged looks. The deputy spat into the snow. "If you see her, let us know. She's accused of stealing from the Henderson ranch. Payroll money went missing the same week she vanished." When they rode off into the trees, the silence they left behind was deafening. Sam turned back toward the cabin. Cherry stood in the doorway, her face pale, her hands shaking. "It's not true," she said, voice breaking. "I never stole anything. They blamed me because I was easy to blame. The rancher's son took it. I saw him. But who'd believe the fat cook over the owner's blood?" Sam's eyes softened, but his face was unreadable. "You should have told me." "I thought it didn't matter anymore," she whispered. "I thought I could start over here." He stepped closer. "You can. But lies, no matter how small, follow us like shadows." Tears welled in her eyes. "Are you sending me away?" He hesitated. The old soldier warred with the healer inside him. Finally, he said quietly, "No, but I need to know who I've let into my home." Cherry's voice trembled. "Then look at me, Doctor. You've known me for months. You've seen my fear, my pain, my scars. Is that not enough to know I'd never harm anyone?" For a long time, he said nothing. Then slowly, he reached out, cupping her cheek in his calloused hand. "It's enough," he said. "But if they come back, we'll be ready." Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of hooves fading into the valley. Inside, Cherry stood trembling in the golden light of the fire, caught between the man who saved her life and the past that refused to die. 2 nights later, the riders returned, this time with lanterns, rifles, and anger sharp enough to cut through the mountain air. Cherry had been sleeping lightly, haunted by the threat of being dragged back to the life she'd escaped. The knock at the door was more like a blow. Sam was already awake, shotgun in hand, eyes steady. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. When he opened the door, the deputy stood there with a smirk. "Evening, Doctor. You lied to an officer of the law. That girl's here. We tracked her prints." Sam's voice was low and deliberate. "She's under my care. You'll need more than accusations to take her." The deputy's lip curled. "You protecting a thief now?" Cherry stepped forward, her face pale but her voice steady. "I didn't steal from anyone. The Henderson boy did. He hid the money in the smokehouse before running off to Helena. I saw it with my own eyes." The woman rider sneered. "And we're just supposed to take the word of some—" Sam's tone cut her off, sharp as a blade. "You're supposed to take the word of a doctor and a man who's seen more truth in blood than you ever will in gossip." The deputy's hand twitched near his pistol. "You talk big for someone hiding behind a liar." Sam moved then, not fast, but with the certainty of a man who'd been in gunfights before. The barrel of his shotgun rose just enough to make his message clear. "You take one more step toward her, and I swear I'll put you down faster than any battlefield wound." The standoff hung heavy in the cold air. Cherry's heart hammered. Her mind screamed to run, but her feet held firm. She saw the same steel in Sam's eyes that she had glimpsed that first night. The man who didn't back down when someone needed protection. Then the woman rider broke the silence. "He's not worth it, Tom. Let's go. Ain't no pay for dead lawmen." The deputy hesitated, then spat into the snow. "You'll regret this, Crawford. Harboring a fugitive's a hanging offense." Sam didn't blink. "Then you better bring a tall tree." The riders turned their horses and disappeared into the woods, their lanterns flickering out one by one until only the cabin's firelight remained. Cherry stood in the doorway, shaking. "You could have been killed." Sam lowered his gun, breathing hard. "So could you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why do you keep risking yourself for me?" He set the shotgun aside and stepped close, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. His voice was raw when he spoke. "Because the night I found you, something in me woke up again. I don't know if it's love, redemption, or madness, but I'll be damned before I let the world take it from me." Her breath caught. For a moment, neither moved. Then she reached up, resting her trembling hand against his chest. "I believe you," she whispered, "and I'm not running any more." The fire cracked, the mountain wind roared, and in that fragile space between danger and safety, between past and promise, two broken lives finally stood side by side, not as doctor and patient, but as equals ready to fight for the life they'd built. Spring came late to Thunder Ridge. When it finally arrived, the valley filled with bird song and the slow thaw of life returning. Snowmelt turned to streams that glistened like ribbons through the pine forest. Inside the cabin, warmth was no longer only from the fire. It came from laughter, from the scent of bread baking, from the way Sam's hand brushed Cherry's shoulder as he passed her a cup of coffee. The days grew longer, gentler. The world outside could still come knocking, but it no longer frightened her. She'd found a kind of strength here that no one had ever given her before, a strength born of being seen, believed, and loved without condition. Sometimes, as the sun set behind the ridge, Cherry would stand on the porch, her healed leg aching slightly but steady beneath her. Sam would join her, silent as always, but his presence was enough. They'd watch the sky burn orange, then fade into violet. One evening, as dusk deepened and the first stars began to shine, Sam spoke quietly beside her. "You could still go back east if you wanted, start fresh somewhere new." Cherry turned toward him, her green eyes glowing in the twilight. "I already did. Right here." He looked at her for a long moment, then reached out and took her hand. Their fingers intertwined, rough and gentle all at once. Behind them, the cabin glowed warm against the night, their small, stubborn light in a world that had tried to snuff them out. "Then stay," he said simply. "It's your home now, if you'll have it." Cherry smiled through quiet tears. "I already do." And somewhere beyond the pines, the mountains exhaled, peace settling over Thunder Ridge at last. Stories like this remind us that kindness can bloom in the most unlikely places, even on a frozen mountain road where pain meets mercy. Cherry and Sam's story isn't just about survival. It's about seeing the humanity in someone the world refused to look at. Every time I read your comments, I'm reminded that love, in all its quiet forms, still matters. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? If you still believe in second chances, don't scroll away. The next story might just be yours.